10 years as to how you're going to improve the quality of education across the board for all students. So, um, what we did was our QEP, we organized our QEP to focus on two learning outcomes, only two: foundational skills, reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and then what we called higher level thought processes, right? Analytical inquiry. And so these analytical reasoning skills, I like to call them the hyphenated disciplines, right? So you used to have biology and medicine, right? But now we have biomedicine, right? And so it's two separate lexicons of thought that come together to create this new discipline. So, so what we were talking about was the idea that in the 21st century, these new hyphenated disciplines are really the places that are growing, and that's where we want our students to go. And so if we were going to focus on that kind of learning for students, we really had to look at the curriculum. So we started with a summer development seminar called GIFTS, the Global Inquiry Faculty Teaching Seminar. And what we did in GIFTS was we took faculty members' their curricula, and we reorganized it, focused on these two learning outcomes, and developed them as digital textbooks in order to be able to immediately get this new curriculum into the hands of students. So when we started this, we were using what we call a BYOD strategy, bring your own device, right? So this is 2010. If you think about the average class at JSU back in 2010, one kid in a class had an iPad, right? Maybe half the class, the kids had a smartphone that was big enough to hold this huge digital book on it. And then the other half of the class, remember those old flip phones, right? They had that little tiny screen on it. Didn't have enough memory to hold this digital book, so we'd house it on an external website, and kids would link to it during class. And then we had another category of student that had absolutely nothing. So what did we do? We printed out a digital textbook that had all these ways of expanding the learning environment, and basically gave them a stone tablet while everybody else was in the 21st century. Well, this was the first book that we wrote. It's called Foundations in Global Inquiry. And all of these faculty members down on the bottom were the folks that were in the very first class of GIFTS. And this book was used for a class called University Success. You probably have something like it. It's the very first class that students take when they arrive on the college campus. And this is a class for what I like to call 13th graders, right? They're not really college students yet. They are fresh off the boat. They just got here off the bus. Many of them are first generation college students, so they haven't had a history of higher education in their families. And suddenly we're throwing them into the deep water, right? So just to kind of show you how we organized the text was organized around what we called these analytical inquiries, these analytical exercises, big questions about the world that became the lens through which we were beginning to examine discipline topics. So this is the first chapter in the book, and for those of you that can't see it, I'll read the first. This is the first question that we asked of students. Now, again, these are 13th graders, right? So they walk into class, and we ask them, African American pop culture has developed new norms in the expression of contemporary language. Using the progression of education in African American society from slavery through the 21st century, discuss how language has evolved or devolved. Now, come on, that's a doctoral dissertation, right? It's at least a master's thesis, and I'm asking this of 13th graders, right? So, but then we wanted to contextualize the question for them. So we added, in what sense, if any, has the legacy of racism influenced the ability of this generation of students to speak and write English? Using examples, citations, answer the question. They can't answer that question. I know they can't, right? They don't have the lexicon to even begin those kinds of interrogations. So what we did was we built everything into the text. So they're reading Frederick Douglass, they're reading Equiano. Every class is an active learning exercise. There's never a lecture. It's always students getting their hands dirty with the material. They're reading the poetry of Phyllis Wheatley. They're reading Washington. They're reading Du Bois. We wanted to talk about identity, so we put a link to the Harvard Implicit Association test so that students could see their own perceptions of identity. And then we wanted to talk about being perceived from within versus being perceived from without. So we put in a link to an incredibly racist film from the turn of the century, The Birth of a Nation, and then a controversial show from the 20th century, The Boondocks. And we wanted them to be able to examine what this is to be examined, to look within your own and then to be perceived from without. One of our English professors put this exercise together. I thought it was brilliant. She divided language into what she called L1 and L2. L1 literally being your mother tongue, what you heard your mother speak at home, and L2 being the language of the academy. And what she did was she brought together excerpts by Zora Neale Hurston and Richard Wright that are actually really academic writings, but they're written in dialect. And so what the students have to do is translate from L1 to L2. It's not a pejorative statement about which one is better, but what it says is that in the academy, we use L2, and that you might have to be able to translate from what you've traditionally heard. And so the idea is that you're literally teaching kids how to code switch. And then we built in our own pre-test and post-test inside the course so that we were looking at these analytical reasoning skills that we were trying to cultivate in our students. Overall, a 17.25% rise in analytical reasoning scores from pre-test to post-test. Huge statistical gain. But if you look at the graph, all of the students on the right side of the graph are the ones making the gains. Those were generally those students that had the technology to be able to interact with this enhanced curriculum. The students on the left side of the graph are actually declining from pre-test to post-test. They're doing worse. And so what we saw was that we were giving to the haves, and the have-nots were getting left farther and farther behind. We were creating our own digital divide. We were seeing that the curriculum was actually showing huge benefits, but the benefits were not across the board for all of our students. And so what we said we needed to do was find a way to democratize our learning platform. How do we have a learning platform where every single student is able to access the latest in curriculum and content through the latest technology? And so we began what we called the democratization of cyber learning. So we decided that we were going to give iPads to every student, every incoming freshman, and we're going to do this for every class moving forward. And then we were going to begin to redesign the curriculum so that we were really focusing on these 21st century learning skills. So we had to figure out how we're going to do that. So there was another institution in our system, another school that had a small initiative, very small. This is a program inside of a department, inside of a school, inside of a college, inside of the university, right? Tiny little initiative. They used state funds to purchase the technology and give it to students. It was seen as a misappropriation of funds, and the president and the provost had to step down. So we liked our jobs. We weren't going to lose them, right? So what we did was we had to use private funding in order to provide the technology for our students. So we have a place called the Mississippi E-Center. It's an entrepreneurship mall. Basically what it is State Farm Insurance left Jackson. They had this regional headquarters. We bought it from the state for pennies on the dollar. And it works as an entrepreneurship mall for us. So we have Homeland Security for the state of Mississippi is there. There's 2 TV stations. There's a bunch of internet startups. Our Department of Journalism and Digital Communication is there. All of those things, all of those entities lease space. And so this space turns a couple $1 million profit a year. So what we do is we pulled the profits off of the top of the e-center, use private dollars. The students on the other side receive a scholarship called TASSI, the Technology Advantage Scholarship Initiative. What TASSI does is it gives every kid access to the device for 2 years. They take possession of it just like it's their own. And then what we do is we depreciate the value of the device down to 0 over 2 years. So if a kid remains enrolled for 4 consecutive semesters, the device rolls off the inventory of the e-center and becomes the property of the student. It does two things for us. It provides an incentive for students to matriculate, which is exactly what we want. And then it puts the technology in the hands of every single student. So now there's this personalized learning platform that's in the hands of every single one of our students. So 2012, we started this. And we had a wireless system that I like to say was built on budget dust. You know, you get to the end of the budget year, right? And there's some money left over, and they go, ooh, buy some wireless for that building over there, right? And then the next year, there's a little bit more money left over, so they go, ooh, get that new system for that building over there, right? But the systems don't talk to each other. There's dead spots all around campus. If you're in one space, you get a great signal. You walk across the hallway, you get nothing, right? So we ripped the whole thing out, spent $1.2 million on wireless, and put in a brand new wireless system across the entire campus. So those were the easy things, right? You can purchase the technology, you can scholarship it to students, you can fix the network so that everything works. The hard thing is you can't tell teachers how to teach. And so what we did was we came up with what we called Teaching with Technology, TWT. And the goal of TWT was to be able to have three what we called learning pillars that were beyond argument. It was not debatable as to whether or not these things are positive in the learning environment. And so what we were saying was that we know that these three things work. What we want you to do is give us a strategy of how you can use this technology to be able to enhance these three learning pillars. We want students to learn actively. We want them to learn by doing and not doing what I'm doing right now, what I like to call preaching and sleeping, right? You got one person preaching and an opportunity for everybody else to be sleeping, right? The second thing was that we wanted to use technology to expand the bounds of the traditional classroom. How are we bringing our classes to the world and the world to our classes? And then the third, I think is the most important one, which is how do we have students involved in the creation of primary source material in their discipline, and how do we do that from the very first day of class and not waiting until students move into their majors? So, we asked faculty members to write these teaching with technology strategies. And then I did something that wasn't so popular on campus, but there was a reason for it. I took those teaching with technology strategies and I folded them into faculty evaluations, right? Now, the goal of this was not to have a punitive instrument, but rather to have an instrument that was, one, predictive of how the learning environment was going to change, and then to have an instrument that was reflective, that looked backwards to see where the hiccups were in the system if faculty members were not able to achieve the teaching with technology strategies that they developed. So, the goal of all of this was that we create this enhanced learning culture. And when I first started talking about this, everybody would get hung up on the shiny devices, right? All of these fancy devices that are just going to rot children's brains, right? That was literally the discussion when we started this. But for us, it is truly about the curriculum. It is all about our curricular focus, and we use the technology as a means, as a vehicle to be able to implement our curricular enhancements so that we can provide this enhanced learning culture. So, these are our learning pillars. So we started off with, as I said before, there we go. So, creation of primary source material. What I'll talk about is how we actually change the curriculum and our spaces so that we were able to do that. How we incorporate active learning into the process of every piece of curriculum that we build and how we use the technology to advance that. And then how we use technology to expand the bounds of the classroom. So, this is just repeating that. So, active learning. How are we designing these new opportunities for active learning in the spaces? how are we, as I said, expanding the bounds? And then finally, how do we get kids to the pinnacle of Bloom's taxonomy, right? How do we get them to the creative phase and not focusing on memorizing? How do we get them to the point that they're literally becoming creative? So, this is our library. It's the first floor of our library. This was all stacks. And quick story of how this happened. So I was the associate dean of liberal arts. And so our provost came in. He went to our dean of liberal arts and sat down with him. And this is how our provost talks. He says, I need your boy. And he was like, what? What are you talking about? I need your boy. I need Blaine to leave liberal arts. And this QEP thing that he's doing, I need to do this across the whole university. So Dean comes to me and he says, the provost says that you need to move across the street. And I was like, what am I supposed to do over there, right? So I go across the street and he says, okay, what I need you to do is I want you to give yourself a title. I want you to write yourself a job description. And then I want you to do that for the next 2 years. So I was like, ooh, okay, right? So he says, okay, and I want you to give it to me all on one piece of paper. I don't need to read a whole big old dissertation for me to understand what's going on. So I gave him one piece of paper, and it was all around these three spaces: innovate, create, and engage. We need a space to be able to transform the curriculum. The curriculum needs to focus on project-based learning and active learning. We need a space for students to be able to engage in active learning. And then we need to be able to have a hands-on center where students can actually create their own knowledge. And so it's like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. Where are you going to put it? I said, well, I think we can put it in the library. Yeah, we can't put it in the library. The library is full of books. I was like, Doc, don't nobody read them books. I'm telling you, that space is empty. You go in the library and it is a ghost town. He's like, really? He says, okay, let's walk and talk. So we leave the tower. We literally have an ivory tower at Jackson State, right? That's the administrative building. Leave that administrative building. We walk across to the library, and he goes, okay, if you can prove it to me over here, we'll see what we can do. Walk across to the library. We start walking through the stacks, and we go into section of the library, and it's just stacks and stacks and stacks of encyclopedias. When was the last time you ever looked up anything in an encyclopedia, right? I mean, so literally I started pulling encyclopedias off the stacks, and you could see the dust fall out of them, right? And so he walks in and he goes, man, you can roll a bowling ball in here and never hit anybody. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about. So I said, okay, all right, sounds good. You go and design it, come back, see what you have, right? So I come back with this design, and he goes, man, that looks really nice. So how much is this going to cost? I said, well, for the first phase, for Innovate, it's going to cost us about $750,000. And he goes, okay. Where you going to get the money from? And I was like, Doc, that's your job. That ain't mine. You're the one with the money. He goes, well, look, I don't have that kind of bread, but the president does. So what I want you to do is come to cabinet tomorrow morning, and I want you to present for cabinet. And if they like what you're doing, we'll see if we can get it funded. Now, of course, he leaves and goes straight to the president's office. And he goes, Blaine's got this idea, and I think we need to fund it, right? So the next morning, I go into cabinet, going with my whole dog and pony show, all my slides and everything, and presented at 8 o'clock in the morning. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, I said I had $750,000. We started construction the next day, and we opened the facility in 6 months. I've never moved at that pace, ever. So the first phase that we opened was Innovate. That was the first big redesign. The second space, the next year, was Create. Create is a center for project-based learning for students. We surrounded those two spaces with resources for students. So in the middle is the Richard Wright Center for the Written Word. Literally, they do everything from your freshman paper to your dissertation. everything in between. And then we built what I call the sustainability engine for the institution, which is JSU Online. And what we were doing before was that we were using a third party for our online offerings. We were basically giving away about $2 million a year in profit sharing with the third party. So we ended the contract with the third party in March. In May, we took 7 complete degree programs totally online, never touched the campus. Between May and August, we tripled the enrollment in online. We built the space. We hired all of the course designers, online marketing person, online recruitment, director of JSU Online, all the resources that we needed. What we did was we actually talked with Arizona State, and we used their model for online offerings. And by tripling the enrollment from May to August, everything was paid for. So every single student that we enrolled from there on out was all pure profit. So right now we're at about 10,000 students. The goal is to grow to 15,000 students in the next 3 years. And almost all of that growth is going to happen in the online space. And every penny of it is profit for the institution. That's how we're able to sustain and be able to increase the learning environment by investing in ways that we can actually grow the institution. And then the third phase, we just opened a few weeks ago, which is called Engage. And Engage is a center for students to literally be able to create their own learning. So I would go around the university and I would give my Pied Piper speech about how learning has to change in the 21st century, how students are literally different, how they literally have different brains than the brains that we grew up with, right? They have grown up in this what I call hyper-connected world. And so if you know high school students, and I happen to live with 2 of them, they always have a device in their hands, right? They are connected to their friends instantaneously. And they have these networks of friends that are global, literally. They will play games with kids all around the world simultaneously, all at the same time. So literally these experiences change the way their brains are wired. They are wired differently. And whether or not that's positive or negative, I'm not going to go there. But the fact is that they're different kids. And if we're going to reach them, we have to find a way to speak their language. It's not their fault. It's our fault because we're not connecting. So I would go all around the institution and talk about this and have all the science to back it up. I can talk about all the neural connections and how all that works. And so faculty members would look at me and they'd say, you know, Blaine, that's nice. That's very nice. We teach 4-4s at Jackson State. We have to do research, service. There's no way, and our teaching, of course, there's no way that I'm going to be able to do all of this stuff on top of what I'm already doing. I don't have the time. I don't have the resources. I don't have the expertise. And frankly, you're talking about all of these great ideas. If I came up with one, I don't think it'd be a very good one. And I said, that's cool. We've built this new center. We have the time. We have the resources. We have the expertise. You come with a bad idea, we'll turn it into a fantastic one. We will build it for you and give it back to you. Does 2 things. It allows the faculty member to be the discipline expert that they are, and allows me to take all of our tech folks and we do the tech stuff for them. So now the faculty members don't have to learn a whole new skill set. So this is the space Innovate. What we did was we brought together what was distance learning, is now JSU Online, and academic IT. And we put them in the same space together so that we had all the tech folks in the same space. And I hired one position called the e-content coordinator. And what this person does is actually coordinates a group of graduate students who really write the books. The faculty members put together an outline. They put together what the content is and the way they want the curriculum to be organized. And then we have the tech folks actually build the digital book for them. And the faculty member really serves as the reviewer. And so again, it allows them to have their discipline expertise, and then we have our people that actually do all of the tech side for them. So we decided that we wanted to. We were doing in gifts. We were doing individual courses for individual faculty members, one-on-ones, right? So this is for your section of your class. Now, we have over 500 faculty members. It's going to take me a very long time to get through the rest of the faculty at that pace. 15 faculty members a summer. You're never going to make it, right? So we started to say, okay, well, we need to look at these large multi-section courses. If we look at general education, this is really where we need to put the teeth of this. This is where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck. So how can we take these large multi-section courses and begin to redevelop them so that we're really focusing on these 3 learning pillars? And what we said was that general education needs to be about 3 learning outcomes. Only 3 things. If a student can do these 3 things at a high level, you can teach them anything, absolutely anything. They need strong foundational skills, reading, writing, speaking, listening, and numeracy. They need, we call it critical thinking, but it's really being able to parse apart a problem and reconstruct it for a newly imagined future, right? And then they need to have what we called analytical inquiry skills. They need to be able to think about their own thinking, metacognitive skills, and they need to be able to think about the society around them, ethical development. And if a kid can do those 3 things at a high level, doesn't matter what the discipline is, you can teach them anything. They can be a musician, they can be a mathematician, they can be an engineer, they can be a sociologist. It doesn't really matter. So we brought together some partners. Words and Numbers are actually the ghostwriters for McGraw-Hill and Cengage and Pearson, all the big textbook companies. So we engaged them directly, and they put together this national set of peer reviewers for us. We partnered with the Shodor Foundation for manipulatives in the sciences, literally for the active learning pieces, and we've been partnering with Apple for a long time. And so we took the first piece, we took what we called PRID, the Pedagogical Redevelopment of Instructional Design. Now, the thing is, I have a lot of acronyms. Everybody teases me about them, right? But all the acronyms are like the things that we're doing, right? So PRID is all about how are we redesigning the instructional design, the instructional delivery process. So we took 3 courses, 3 developmental courses, introductory reading, writing, and math, and then 3 first-year courses, biology, English, and math one, a college algebra. And in the very first year, we were able to do some things. First thing, we were able to lower costs for students by over 90% right off the bat. So the traditional textbooks that they were using were costing between $100 and $300 a book. These books cost $9.99, and we sold them through the iBookstore. Now remember, we have a huge amount of financial need in our students. And our students, if you're on Pell, for example, and you're taking 4 or 5 Gen Ed classes, you're paying between $1,000 and $1,500 a semester just for books. If you just barely got here, you don't have those kinds of funds, right? So what our students were doing was that they were using their federal financial aid refund checks to purchase materials for class. Is this something that you've seen before? Okay. So at Jackson State, those refund checks don't come out until 4, 5, 6 weeks into the semester. So what that means is if you look at the first half of the class, the data would show that students were just flat. They didn't have what they needed to be successful, and high numbers of DWs and Fs, right? After the midterm, you could literally see it for example, if you looked at engagement in Blackboard, you could see it. After the midterm, kids are working their behinds off. What they're trying to do is learn a semester's worth of material in half a semester. It's not that they don't want to access, it's that they can't afford the access. So what we were able to do by lowering the cost was be able to literally provide all of the academic content that you need for your class for the price of a meal at McDonald's. That was our barrier. right? And what we did was we pushed out through our mobile device management system the first two chapters of every book to every single student on the first day of class. That meant that on the first day of class, a faculty member was immediately able to start teaching. Students were immediately able to start learning. What that did was it gave everybody all the materials that they needed to get up to drop and add. So you can move from class to class, you can switch from wherever you are, you still have all your materials. And then at the end of drop and add, that's when you paid your $10 and you had all your materials for the semester. The other thing that we were able to do was, again, coordinate the curriculum to focus on 21st century learning outcomes. We brought new relevance to the curriculum. So we were able to bring back all the voices in the conversation that have been historically left out, right? And then finally, we used all of this to create our own internal revenue structure. So it works like this. If you take Department X, right, we'll say the English department, we have roughly 2,000 students that take English comp every semester. 7 out of every $10 for the textbook comes back to the department that wrote the book. So now the English department gets a check for $14,000 every semester just for using the book that they wrote for that one class. They can use that however they want it. They can use it to build more content. They can use it for faculty development. They can use it for travel, however they want to use it. On the other hand, students can actually afford the book, so they buy it, right? And what it does is it creates this wheel, and it allows this to now begin to grow throughout the rest of the ecosystem. So this is the fuel that keeps this ecosystem moving. So our next step was to say, okay, how do we do this across the board for all students? And we began what we called the digital core. And so last summer, we were able to develop content for all of the courses that you see listed above. Literally, faculty members last summer went through the development phase. We developed digital textbook for all of these courses. We built the books over the summer. We were able to implement them in the first semester, and so we do a beta test in the first semester where we test them with a class. Second semester, we do all of the redevelopment, whatever bugs there are, things that we need to fix, right? We go back and redevelop the books. Those books now are going out for external peer review, and they'll be peer reviewed over the summer. And then at the end of the external peer review process, these books go up for publication. And what we did was we changed our tenure and promotion rules so that digital content counts for publication just like print content does. And we actually organized it according to what we call this equivalency chart. So a lot of this content is built using open educational resources. These are resources that are out and they are intended for faculty members to be able to use for academic content. If a textbook has 20%, 25% original content, 75% OER, it counts as a scholarly article. If it goes up to 50-50, it counts as a chapter in a book. If it goes up to 75% original content, 25% OER, now it counts as a book in the discipline. So what we're able to do now is to incentivize faculty to be able to publish in this mechanism, and they get the TMP credit for it as well. So this is how all of it comes together. And as I said before, the first step was to build, innovate, to redesign the curriculum. All of the assessments in those curricula use project-based learning. Project-based learning is in our Create Center. And our students actually helped design this center. Create is separated into the 4 phases of project-based learning. So, first phase is discussion. You just got to have a space to sit down and talk through all the problems, right? Second phase is conceiving. And this is actually a BYOD space. But bring your own device now makes sense for us because all the students have the same D. They have the same device. The next space is realization. This is where all the technology is. You can do anything from virtual reality to actually printing out an actual thing. And then finally, the build space, which is actually where all of the heavyweight equipment is. And so these are our students. And because it is their center and they helped design it, they had their own grand opening. So when the student arrives in Create, they first encounter a knowledge market. This is where our graduate assistants work. This is the discuss space. This is Conceive. You can see the little iPad and the keyboard that they all get. There's some little three-walled rooms so students have a little bit of privacy. This is the Realize space. And then finally Build. And so the last stage for us was that what happens when you take all of this stuff and put it on steroids and you literally give students what they need to build their own solutions to world problems. So we built Engage. Engage is a maker space and it is full of 3D printers. We have 15 3D printers in the space. They do everything from regular PLA plastics to advanced materials that print in carbon fiber and Kevlar. So you can print really durable, super strong pieces. What Engage does, these are just some renderings of the space. These are the various pieces of technology that are in there. And so I thought that it would be best if I could actually let our students tell you what it does rather than me.
As a freshman, I was a part of the first class to receive iPads, and that was an amazing experience. It was great watching from as a freshman, seeing my professors and my classmates use the iPads just a little bit to now it being an integral part of our education. Having the chance to further my technological intelligence, it's made me more aware that I am interested in STEM education as far as technology. I'm also interested in building smart cities and smart transportation systems. It has made me realize that technology is really a big part of who I am, and I'm excited to see where it takes me.
As long as you utilize the space, then you will definitely grow. There's just so many things you can do inside the Create Center. We usually use one of the cubicles over here, mainly the one in the back with the big whiteboards, so we can all see what is going on, so we can write equations or problems that we're working on. Well, I'm really looking forward to using the 3D printers and the new Engage Center. I can envision myself building a bridge, even building a city. The sky's the limit.
When I came to JSU, we were engaging a major digital humanities initiative that digitized about 35,000 documents in the Margaret Walker personal papers and made them available for free to scholars and students throughout the world. And to see our students be able to engage 21st century learning methods, to see them being able to use and have access to technology that they might not otherwise have, has been a wonderful thing. And to see our faculty, who may have been reared in a style of pedagogy that was 20th century based, all of a sudden they're all engaging 21st century teaching methods. And that has been a wonderful, really kind of revolution here to see at Jackson State.
We've been focusing on 3 learning pillars. We want students to learn actively, we want to expand the bounds of the traditional classroom, and we want students engaged in the process of developing primary source material in their discipline. And we want that to happen from the very first day of class. The combination of transitioning the CF Moore building along with the H.T. Sampson Library is all focused on the learning environment and how are we producing a learning environment that is incentivizing the kinds of learning behaviors that we want to see happen. Yes, the goal has been ambitious. Our goal is to reach every student in the institution, and that's why we've focused our efforts on the undergraduate core curriculum. This allows us to really focus on where students are now and to build a learning system that takes into context the students of today as opposed to looking at the students of yesterday.
So, just a few of the impacts. Just to show a few things that have been done. This is a group of students that did a study abroad in Brazil. We gave them all iPads. They used them for, these were all graphic design students, and they used them to create. The analytical exercise that they were looking at was to use graphic design as a means to be able to illuminate issues that they encountered in their study abroad. And so they built these digital postcards looking at culture, income inequality, economic disparities. And the students were able to use graphic design as a lens now to be able to focus on the ways that they saw issues in the countries that they were studying. Um, this is a new way of assessing learning. And so this is actually a final exam in a psychology class. Again, you'll need a little bit of sound here. These are all student created projects that they all created on their iPads. So, totally new opportunity to look at the way that we assess learning. And the point of all of this, again, is to get to the pinnacle of Bloom's taxonomy. How do we get kids to the creative stage where they're literally creating their own learning? So, One of the last things that we did, this just happened a few weeks ago, we gave students a challenge and we put them in interdisciplinary teams. So we had an engineer, an art major, a graphic design major, and a business entrepreneurship major that were all on teams together. And we gave them 1 week. And we said, we would like for you to solve with a working prototype a Mississippi issue. You can pick your whatever the problem is, but we need you to build something that will actually solve the problem. Come up with a business plan to develop and market it. And we had what we called our Tiger Shark Tank. One of the teams of students came up with what they called the clean straw, the evolution of the straw. And what this is a straw that they built on a 3D printer that has a carbon filter built into it. And so you could literally drink from a polluted source, and everything that you drank through the straw was potable. And so they actually built their own working prototype in a week and had something that they could actually take to market. So for us, this is like the epitome of what we're trying to get. How do we get students to literally not only create their own knowledge, but literally create their own careers? So all of that is great, teaching and learning, but there's all of these ways that we need to support students around teaching and learning, advising, retention, all of these other pieces, right? So we've built our own professional advising center that all centers around mobile technology. And so we began with advising this past semester. We were able to triple the number of students that we were able to contact at a time, and we were able to do it all through mobile technology. We had what we called our advising flash mobs, where we would show up in the dorms, we would show up in the student center, and we just advise students right there on the spot. We bring it to them. They don't wait for them to come to us. So this is just a few pieces of information about our professional advising center. I'm going to move through this a little bit more quickly. And then finally, everything for us has to be about research and evaluation. The phases that we go through in order to implement all of this work is called days. It is our design phase. And so we build everything according to first design, secondly, the affect. How does it begin to affect students? How do we see it changing perceptions around the campus? Then we look at the uptake. How much is this beginning to saturate through the system? And then finally, what's the effect? How is it changing student learning opportunities? And so that's the way that we begin to evaluate all of the pieces of this ecosystem. And so our research and evaluation method really focuses on what I like to call a value-added model. So at the base of that is what happens when you have a campus where everything is driven through mobile technology. And a lot of campuses stop here. You pass out a bunch of technology to kids and you go learn. And what do? They go to Facebook and Vine, and they use it the way that they know how to. So the next level for us is what happens when you have a technology-infused learning environment, when you have a capable, trained faculty member that's actually leading this learning environment. And then finally, what happens when you coordinate the curriculum so that it drives the entire process. So for us, this is the answer to the question that I started off with at the very beginning. What cyber learning is a coordinated curriculum that is then implemented through this engaged learning community and then delivered to students through mobile technology. So as I said, in real life, I make a living by waving a stick. So I love this quote by Leonard Bernstein. He says, "The conductor is the least powerful person in the room. His instrument makes no sound, yet he must convince those with the power to conform to his vision." And literally, I have a stick and I can't hit anybody with it, right? Bernstein says that this is achieved through allowing each artist to have their own individual expression within the vision of the whole. And that's honestly what we try and do. We try to provide room for every faculty member, every staff member, every student to have space for their own individual expression within the much larger vision of this teaching and learning ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't really need the mic. At this point, I wanted us to maybe utilize the time to pose some questions to Dr. about some of the things that they've done at Jackson State, ideas about actual transform teaching and learning. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to our audience.
Great.
And we have a mic.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Blaine, let me first congratulate you. That was outstanding.
Thank you.
I am Dr. Clyde Ashley, Associate Professor in the School of Business and Industry. I'm quite impressed with the entire presentation because I think it was very innovative and creative. And for sure, we could use that here at Florida A&M. And congratulations for being at Jackson State, and I won't request that we steal you outright, but at the same time, I think we need to use you as a consultant to help bring some of those great ideas here. Let me say this, that I think it's really important, the critical thinking and problem solving process.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question I have is, where is that taught as a foundation? Because I think technology is great and our kids are great with technology, but to simply be able to, and I'm going to use this term fetch, and I'm using it intentionally, to fetch data, but not be able to do anything with it, apply it, and so forth and so on.
Exactly.
So the question is critical thinking, problem solving, and you mentioned analytical. So where is that taught? And to what extent have you received pushback or openness from the faculty in terms of buying into that process?
Absolutely. So I'm going to answer you in a couple of different pieces. So when we were redesigning general education, one of the things that we did was we took our Center for Undergraduate Research and we built in a freshman research component. And so we wanted to talk about critical thinking. And so all of the digital books that we built for the first semester freshman courses all answered one question. The question was, how do you rebuild Liberia after Ebola? And so in their English classes, they're looking at the literature of disease spreading and how are they communicating the idea of disease spreading so that they were able to contain the disease and then be able to start to rebuild after that. In their mathematics courses, in their algebra courses, they were building mathematical models, looking at the idea of containing of the pandemic and then how were they able to decrease the numbers. In their biology classes, they're looking at the biological models. In their chemistry classes, they were looking at the chemistry. And so we had the faculty members organize the curriculum around these analytical exercises, these big questions about the world. And what we wanted students to do was to use the discipline topic now to be able to deconstruct the issue and be able to use the research process to really build their own answer to the question. So we had a freshman research symposium in the first semester, and we had kids from all over the institution presenting research projects. It was absolutely fascinating. And again, these are 13th graders, right? So one of the ones that blew me away the most was a group of art. These were students in art appreciation. Right? One of the classes that I taught music appreciation for many years. It's a little challenging to get students into Beethoven, right? But these students in art appreciation built a quilt that had images of kids that had lost two parents in the pandemic. And what they were doing was using art therapy as a means of rebuilding society after the Ebola crisis. It was an absolutely powerful presentation. And so the things that students were doing, the ways that they were engaging in the process was totally different than when we stood up in front of them and talked at them. We were actually getting them to do the learning process. They were actually engaging actively in the learning process. In order to do all of this work, the first thing that we did was we brought all the faculty members together. So we brought faculty together from across the entire university, all looking at general education. And we came up with the learning pillars, we came up with the learning outcomes. All of that was collaborative work that the faculty did together. It was a matter of bringing together the collective intelligence in the institution and use that in ways to advance student learning. So the whole conversation was not about what I have done for the past 25 years. It's about what are we doing now to engage students in new and powerful ways.
Did I understand you to say that you convinced the administration in one presentation to fund $750,000? If that's my understanding, then for sure we need to use you as a consultant. How were you able to do that?
Well, so this is an interesting process. So as I said, we've been at this, started this in 2010. And during that period, we've had 3 presidents and 5 provosts since 2010. So every new administration was a new conversation. But the understanding that went across all of those administrations was that we need to do something powerful to change student learning. And it's paid real dividends for the institution. We have had 4% enrollment growth for the past 4 years since we started the initiative. We've seen our numbers of students with DWs and Fs on the decline. We hope that this will lead to increased matriculation periods, so students will graduate faster. Because we have high numbers of students that are on financial aid, if you're there for 6 years, you run out of money. We need to get them to graduate within 4 to 5 years. So all of these ways that we're trying to innovate is to really be able to create not only that learner, but to create a graduate down the road. So,
Good morning. I'm Dr. Merlin Langley, Associate Professor of Social Work and Director of Interdisciplinary Studies. I have 3 questions. One, do you plan on expanding this model to the upper division courses? 2, have you thought about how you can integrate various disciplines on campus as related to this approach to teaching and learning? And thirdly, have you thought about how this can be expanded to commit some type of outreach project to benefit the community,
Yes.
surrounding community,
yes.
and improve the town-gown relationship?
Yes. So I'm gonna go backwards through your questions, right? So the last question first. What we're doing right now is actually partnering with our local school system, Jackson Public Schools. I've been meeting with the superintendent with JPS for the past few months. And they have a technology initiative in their high schools. They have these high school academies. One of the things that they didn't do was to really focus on the professional development piece and the curriculum piece. They basically passed out a lot of technology and said, teachers, go for it. And so, so we've been working to begin to spill down our curriculum into the K-12 space. That's going to do a few things for us. It's going to create the entering freshmen that has the profile that we want to see. They'll have the skills that we've already built into the curriculum. We're also partnering with the public schools to increase concurrent enrollment. So we'll have high school students that are actually landing on our campus for their junior and senior year, so that we'll be able to build those skills in them right there on the campus. So we're doing a number of things to try and spill this down into the community, into the public school system. As far as growing throughout the rest of the curriculum, the reason that we've focused our efforts on general education is so that we can get the biggest bang for our buck, right? We know that we're going to hit every student in the institution that way. And what we see is this kind of pyramid happening. As we enhance what's happening in general education, it does two things. It creates internal demand. So now students leave Gen Ed and they go, wait now, I'm not going in this class and sitting up and I never see the front of your face. All I see is the back of your head writing on the board all class period, right? So it does that, but it also does another thing. It creates internal demand in the faculty itself. So we've been able to do some really, really interesting interdisciplinary projects. So one, Dr. Niesman on our campus. He's in the English and Modern Foreign Languages department, and he's a Shakespearean. So he wrote his digital book on using Shakespeare as a lens to analyze foreign relations. So he used Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, and Othello as a lens to look at foreign relations. He taught the class at Jackson State, and then he taught the same class at a teach abroad in Nanjing, China. So last year, students at Jackson State and students in Nanjing, China, are analyzing foreign relations through the lens of Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, and Othello from the American perspective and the Chinese perspective, and they're communicating back and forth through their devices, right? Totally transformative learning experience. And what happens is that the more that we have these upper division classes that are transforming this way, it creates a demand in the faculty, because what happens is you create the Cool Kids Club, right? So faculty members are like, man, this is like the coolest thing in the world. And then the other faculty members are like, well, I want my class to be cool too. So how can I get in the Cool Kids Club? So by creating this kind of environment of internal demand, both through the students and the faculty, is really how we expect to see this grow throughout the rest of the curriculum. And it happens through what I like to call AstroTurf, right? So the principle of AstroTurf is that it looks grassroots, right? It looks like nice green grass that grows perfectly green, but actually there's a really clear structure that allows that grass to grow nice and clean. And so we try to use that AstroTurf principle in order to be able to grow this throughout the rest of our ecosystem. So, did I answer all of your questions? Was that all three? Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, I can hear you great.
What are some strategies that you use for upper division courses where you have students that transfer and may not have their 13th grade
Right.
in this type
Mm-hmm.
of
Right. So we have large numbers of transfer students. Community college space is huge in Mississippi, and what we're finding more and more is that students are using the community college system for their first 2 years and transferring into the institution, generally in their junior year. And so we've done a couple things. So our technology initiative focuses on incoming freshmen, right? So that means that you get to that junior year, you've got this transfer student that comes in. They haven't been part of this environment, this learning environment for 2 years, and they were coming in and they didn't have the technology. So the first thing that we did was we created we call it a loaner program, but basically what we do is we give you a device for a year, and give it to the transfer students so that they come into the same learning environment that everybody else has been engaged with. The other piece is that in the curriculum, traditionally, the junior year is where we ask students to become majors. And that's really the part where we began to it sounds like this sounds pejorative, but it's the point at which we began to expect them to think. Right. This were the times when they were working on their major projects. They were working on those. They had gone through all of their barrier courses in order to be able to get into that major study. And so, by focusing on those three learning pillars, what we were able to do in these upper level classes is to focus on the mechanism of the delivery of instruction. And so what we were really focusing on is how does the faculty member engage with these students? And what we saw was that the faculty member's role began to change. Instead of being the deliverer of information, they became the guide to the process of student inquiry. And so it was really about trying to get students to ask the right questions and organizing the content so that students could go through that process. So I taught an honors class of, this is one of the first year classes, University Success. And every day I'd walk into the class and I would ask the students a question. And then I'd sit down. And they would have to look it up. They'd have to find out about it. And then they would get up and debate the question. You had to answer the question from two different sides. So after about 5 or 6 weeks of class, one of the young ladies in the front of the class raised her hand. She says, Dr. Blaine, you're not a very good teacher. And I was like, what are you talking about? She says, all you do is ask us questions, and then we do all the work. And so I told her, I said, okay, well, so for tomorrow, you've got to look up the Socratic method and come into class and be able to discuss that. So it's really about, for us, it's really about transitioning the pedagogy, right? And so how are we engaging students in new ways that we're able to transfer the pedagogy so that students are actually actively engaged in the learning process? I think that's the biggest twist for us. And that happens all the way throughout the curriculum, especially at the junior and senior year. Yes, sir.
Particularly in my logic course, I find that my students don't have a problem with logic. They're really struggling with algebra.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering what you all do innovatively to specifically strengthen the algebra skills
Yep.
of the students, because I find that that's undergirding
Yep.
for much of the learning process.
So we're doing a couple of things now. One of the things that we're doing is actually considering, we're looking at separating out algebra from what we have called, I got to remember the right term for it. It's quantitative analysis. And so there are many disciplines where students only take one math class, and they'll take algebra as the one math class, which if we were teaching writing, you would never just take a class on paragraphs. You would teach a class on writing, right? And algebra is part of a sequence of courses that actually gives you the real background that you need in quantitative thinking, right? So what we've said is that, for example, if you look at a typical liberal arts student, in their curriculum, they only have one math class. They have college algebra. And what we saw was really high numbers of students, almost a 50% failure rate in that class. And students taking that class 2 and 3 times before they were able to pass it, and then nothing else in their curriculum that supported it. And then what we also saw was that in the junior year, we saw large numbers of students having challenges with their statistics class. So the idea is that we focus on quantitative analysis, quantitative reasoning, and we provide 2 paths for students: those that need the algebra, trigonometry, calculus track for engineering and the sciences, and those that need a quantitative reasoning towards statistics track in their curriculum. And so right now we're actually examining splitting the tracks so that we can focus on those 2 tracks and give the skills, the discipline specific quantitative skills that students need in order to be successful in those junior and senior years. We're not there yet, but the big piece for us is that we can now have that conversation. We couldn't even start talking about that before, and we will be able to provide both of these tracks, redesign the curriculum, and implement it in under a semester. So it's a different kind of pace, a different kind of agility that the institution has in order to meet the needs of students the way that we see them now. Cool. Any other questions? Yes.
What were some of the challenges that you encountered in learning?
So the biggest challenge is that when we started this, there were a number of faculty members that thought the sky was falling. Right? It was penny penny. The sky is falling. You're ruining the institution, and you're dumbing down learning for students. And instead, what we've talked about is how do we. First of all, rigor is not failing kids. Okay, teaching has to have learning in order to be. There's a cycle there. If you're teaching and everybody's failing, you're not teaching because nobody's learning, right? So what we had to do is to take out this false equivalence that rigor equals failing students, and to really build a system where we were focusing on skills. What skills do students need in order to be successful? And here's the tricky thing: is that the way we've all been trained is in content, right? In my discipline, music. These are the composers you have to know. You have to know these pieces, and you have to go. Well, if we're talking about general education, why? Why do you need to know this information? Why do you need to use this content? And so instead, what we started to talk about were the skills that students need to be successful. And how do we use content as a means by which to develop those skills? And so once we started that conversation, it was a totally different way of looking at teaching and learning, because now we were saying, well, maybe we don't need to cover everything in the world. Maybe we just need to be able to focus on them being able to do this, 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 and this. And if they can do these things, we know they'll be successful at the next step. And so it's still a conversation in the institution. I mean, we're not there yet. I have a biology book that's a digital book that's 20 something chapters. There's no way you're ever going to cover that much material. But as academics, we feel like we need to put that much in it because that's how much the other book has, right? But the fact is that you don't use all of that. And so how do we focus in on what students need? How do we focus in on where we want them to go and customize the delivery and the content so that we can best serve the students that are in front of us today, not the students that used to be in front of us 25 years ago. Yes, sir. Sure. So our retention rate was not bad. It was around 74.5% when we started our initiative. It's up around 79% now. The goal is that we move to the mid 80s in the next 3 to 4 years. So we've seen some pretty significant gains in student retention. Graduation rates have bumped up a touch, right? So we're in the mid 40s with our graduation rate. We're trying to get up above 50% with graduation rates. We've seen enrollment growth. We were about 8,500 students when we started this initiative. We're right at 10,000 students now. So we've seen substantial enrollment growth. Now you can't attribute all of that to this one initiative, right? It's not a linear one for one. But what we have been able to see is that this enhanced learning environment, it carries a different kind of weight with students and their families and their parents. So when you come to Jackson State, you see this kind of learning environment. You go to XYZ university down the road, and you see something totally different. And so there becomes this kind of uh, understanding in the just in the environment of the entering students that this is a different kind of learning environment. I'll give you just one story to kind of equate the way it worked. We had a college tour that came through, and these were parents and their families, and it must have been 400 or 500 kids that were on this tour, and they all had, two parents, auntie, uncle with them, right? So this huge group of folks, right? And so one of the first stops of the tour was the library, and so they all come through the library. The parents come through this create space, and the students are all like, "Wow, this is really amazing." The parents, almost half the parents, sat down in create and they said, y'all go on the rest of the tour because we already see if they put this much money into focusing on the learning environment, then this is a place I want my child to go. I don't need to see nothing else. You go look at the dorms and the basketball courts and all the rest of the stuff. We're good. And so it was able to we were able to have a different kind of conversation, and we were really able to demonstrate that in the ways that we tried to take care in building these learning environments for students. So, yes, sir.
I know we talked about campus.
Hmm.
Can you tell the traffic and on the underprepared students?
Mm,
We talked about
that's right. So, we did a number of things with our summer bridge program, actually just starting last summer. Um, so we have two programs. So we have the summer bridge, which are actually academically very strong students. They actually go to our honors college, and so we built this digital curriculum for them. And those students actually get the first semester of their college study during the summer. And so we were able to see those students actually, I'm not going to remember the exact percentage, but it was almost half of the class graduated in under 4 years. They were graduating in 3.5 years. All of them, or the retention rate for that group was in the almost in the 90%. So it was very, very high. We also had at the same time our um, I say those students with academic holes in their background. I don't like to call them underprepared, but they had some things that were missing, some gaps. And so one of the most exciting things was that we separated the class by gender, right? So we had male sections and female sections, and we had this enhanced curriculum that we built for our developmental students. And for the first time last summer, all of our developmental ed students that were 3.0 and above were all African American males. We've never seen that. And we were able to move that group in incredible new ways. We built learning communities all around them. They built their own supportive communities. We saw Black boys in the dorms and in the library forming study groups. They went beyond where we even expected them to go. And so again, you can't attribute this all to the technology, but I think you can equate it to this enhanced learning environment. And it was all about them creating community that was supporting their own learning. So it's very exciting. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, in this new learning environment, has there been feedback on faculty teaching? What has that
Um, that's a good question. I don't think it has impacted teaching. I mean, we still teach our same 4 4s, so that hasn't changed. Um, what some things have changed are that we assess learning in new ways. So, for example, the video that you saw, that was a psychology exam. The four students that were in the video were actually the four student teams. And the assignment that the faculty member gave them was to take a psychological concept from the class and to build a video that explained it to a population. How could you convince somebody that this is an issue. And so the faculty member had to watch a whole bunch of movies, but it wasn't grading tests. Um, Even in my own discipline, in music, uh, one of the things that I did was I built an iTunes U course for my orchestra. And so in the iTunes U course, so in music, kids procrastinate like crazy, right? They wait to the last week before the concert to learn the hard parts of the piece, right? So for the first month of the semester, you're going, no, it's a B flat, not a B natural. No, it's a B flat, not a B natural, over and over and over again, right? So what I did was I built this iTunes U course. I put all their music in the course. I put recordings of all of my favorite conductors conducting all the pieces, and then I put metronome, a tuner, all the things that they needed, right? And then I put in an excerpt sheet. It had all of the hardest parts for every instrument in the orchestra. And I said that every student had to upload a video of themselves performing one perfect example of every single excerpt that was on the excerpt list. And we didn't rehearse for the first 3 weeks of the semester. That's all they did. And you had to pass that exam before you could come to rehearsal. So the first rehearsal, I had like 3 kids there. Right? Nobody's there. So, but by the end of that week, all the kids had turned in their stuff. The first rehearsal I had that semester was better than the concert that I had the semester before. It was the first time that everybody was prepared. Now, I had been fussing at kids for years to say, go learn your part, go learn the music. But I had to find a way for them to motivate themselves. And what I found was that musicians are incredibly neurotic individuals. And if we listen to ourselves play out of tune, we're not going to accept that. And so the kids said, I had to practice 5 hours to record that one excerpt. And I was like, thank you very much. That's exactly what I wanted, right? So again, it was a part of getting the kids to do the work. The exciting thing for me was that I had to figure out new stuff now. So halfway through the semester, I uploaded, we were doing the Haydn Cello Concerto. So I took a bunch of my favorite cellists performing Haydn Cello Concerto, and all the students had to notate all the bowings in the piece. And this is like, for string players, this is like, right, going through all the bowings and all the pieces. They came into a rehearsal, and every kid could vote on the bowings all the way through the piece. Students were arguing over bowings. It was like nirvana to me. Like one kid was like, "Oh no, we can't go down bow here because we're on the dominant chord." And then another kid's like, "No, it's a deceptive cadence. It goes from a 5 to a 6 chord. So you got to go up bow." And I'm like, "Yes, I can leave. You don't need me." Right? It was getting them to engage in the learning process. And I'll tell you, it was transformative. I brought in a soloist from New York. She flew down. She got off the plane, came straight to the rehearsal, sits down, and we play the first movement of Haydn Cello Concerto. And she turns around. She was like, "I could be in New York right now. These kids sound fantastic." And these are black kids in Mississippi playing Haydn at an extremely high level. So they can do. We just need to give them the means by which to actually make it happen. So, cool. Yes, sir. Oh, a million things. The one thing that I've learned is to fail early. Fail as early as you can. And don't be afraid to redo it. Because at every step along the way, my suppositions were not always correct. But what I tried to do is learn a lesson early, to fail early, and then to be able to redesign and go back. And it's you don't have to wait for something to fail. You can see it moving off the rails and then move it back. And I mean, there's a million examples of that. I did a pilot with jquad1 where we wanted to test digital content in all of the courses. And so we had iPad only sections of courses. I had all of their content. You'd walk in on the first day, you'd hit a button, everything downloaded onto the device. That's how it was supposed to work. But what we saw was that we had these crazy enrollment codes, and faculty members didn't understand how the enrollment codes worked. And so second day of class, I said, this is not working. And so I brought all the faculty together. I gave them a really simple way of delivering the material so that everybody would have what they needed, and we were able to get them back, where they wanted. So it's a set of lessons, but you have to. I think that the most important part of this kind of work is that you have to be willing to fail early. And if you can get it back on the rails quickly, it'll work. One of the principles that I try to operate by is an acronym that I call FUMIFU, FUMIFU. First use must inspire future use. If it craps out the first time, your doubters are going to say, oh, I told you this stuff didn't work, right? And then it becomes an excuse for people not to use it. So you pilot things small, you make sure that they work the first time, and then you take that and expand and build one. It's called FUMIFU, FUMIFU. First use must inspire future use. So in other words, you can't crash it the first time you fly it.
Well, I want us to give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
I really appreciate Dr. Blaine and the fact that he took time to come out and share with us the experience of Jackson State. You always hear about success stories, but one of the things that really struck me about Dr. Blaine and his story is that they were a work in progress, and we are a work in progress. And so there were things that he could share with us that I think potentially we can use in really working on our development and our growth here at FAMU. So I really want to appreciate you, or want to tell you I appreciate you for all that you've shared, the fact that you took. He's a very, very, very busy man, as we found out, Marusha. He's pretty much all over. He's Apple's best kept secret because everybody wants to talk to him and they want for him to come and present. So I'm really glad that we were able to get you here for our conference. So thank you very much. Very, very much. And now, Ms. Williams is going to come and talk about our social share.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Deidre Williams. I am the program coordinator for the Teaching and Learning Center. So I am expecting to see your faces at least once in the coming year as we continue to prepare for dynamic speakers like Dr. Blaine. Right now, this is what we call the social share part of the conference, where we would like to ask each of you to pull out your mobile devices if you have brought them and share something that you've learned from Dr. Blaine today via Twitter or Facebook. We will later go during the conference go and search for your tweet or post and randomly select someone to win one of these 9 door prizes. So please take a moment to do that while I select the 150th person to register. And 150 is important because that was our goal. And we superseded that goal by about 4 people this year. So I would like to give you all a hand for just registering and realizing how important teaching and learning is to the university. So the 150th person to register is Samuel Taylor. If you would come and select any gift that you would like, and after each presentation, we will do a door prize drawing. Thank you so much for your attention, and remember to tweet using the hashtag TLC 16. Thank you. Yes. Also, just note that on your program it says 2016, but we like to be brief in the social media world. So just use the one that's presented on the screen, FAMU TLC 16. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're long overdue for maybe a short break at this point. So if you want to refresh your coffee, get some um, breakfast items, and we are going to transition to get ready for Dr. Hyman, who's slated to be our next presenter. Dr. Hyman is the Assistant Vice President for International Education, who could not be here today, but we were trying to utilize technology and really make his presentation engaging so that he could actually interface with us from Spain. We have a learning community over in Spain, and Dr. Hyman left on Sunday to join them. So we are going to take a short break as the technology team attempts to go ahead so that we can potentially Skype him in. And I'm crossing my fingers that this works. So we'll be back in 5. Okay, okay, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, he muted it? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you will, go ahead and grab that last cup of coffee, and we are going to prepare for our next presentation. We were trying to get Dr. Hyman, Skype him in from Spain, and we were having technical difficulties. And so we will move on with our program and potentially come back to our presentation by Dr. Hyman, who was going to be Skyping from Spain. So our next presenter, Dr. Rajiv Dalal, is a assistant professor in the School of Allied Health Sciences, and he is also the director of clinical education. Dr. Dalal, I had the pleasure of working with and meeting Dr. Dalal maybe 2 years ago in one of the faculty meetings that I came to. And I will say, Allied Health, they have to have some of the best college or department meetings ever. When you come there, you're just eating all day. And I'm just like, is this a party or is this really a meeting? And I'm not talking about, they have Panera brought in, but, somebody's made a pound cake, somebody has macaroni and cheese, somebody is frying fish. I said, I can't come over here too often. It's dangerous. But I applaud the School of Allied Health Sciences because they are always so supportive of all of our faculty efforts. And Dr. Dalal is a part of that school. And he is also a member of the 2015 faculty learning community. And he will talk a little bit about in his presentation about his experience with that. And before he comes, I just want to kind of do an informational plug here. There will be a sign-up sheet back at the teaching and learning table of sorts for individuals to potentially sign up for the 2016 faculty learning community for this summer. We will be talking about rebuilding and retooling our classroom. That will be our theme this summer. And there will also be a sign up sheet for the faculty think tank. And so if you heard something that intrigued you, inspired you from Dr. Blaine's presentation, I invite you to join the faculty focus group that will explore how we can look at the model from Jackson State or some element of the model from Jackson State and implement that here. And so if you're interested in being a part of the think tank, again, it'll say the faculty focus group, or I forget how the sign up sheet is entitled, but that sign up sheet will be back there along with a sign up sheet for the faculty learning community for 2016. And at this point, I will yield to Dr. DeLaw, who will come and present. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boston. So, as Dr. Boston mentioned, I am from the School of Allied Health Sciences, also known as the School of On the Move, and I am specifically within the Division of Physical Therapy, the Director of Clinical Education. And what I'm going to talk to you about today doesn't really have to do too much with clinical education. It has to do really with classroom teaching. And when I had the opportunity to participate in the faculty learning community last summer, I didn't really know what I was getting myself involved with. I didn't really know what it entailed, what I would be asked to do or needed to do. But I'm really glad that I did participate, because it really gave me a chance to kind of refocus and kind of take a step back and look at the way I was delivering content in my courses. And so one of the tasks that we were asked to do was to choose a course within our curriculum or that we specifically teach, and to really see how we could apply a lot of the concepts we were learning and covering last summer into that course. And so this talk is a summary of some of those changes that I made within my course and some of the lessons I learned during that process. So if each of you, not to step away from the mic. So if each of you can do me a favor and go ahead and look at your wrist. Either hand, it doesn't matter. Now, when you look at the wrist, many of you know there are many features of the wrist that you can apparently see. What you see is you see the skin, you may see some tendons, you may see some veins. If you were to grab onto your wrist with the other hand, you may feel a few bony prominences, which are the underlying wrist bones. You may feel some of the softer tissue, which could be the subcutaneous tissue, which could be the muscular tissue. Whatever it is, you have a certain perception of the wrist when you look at your own wrist. Now, this quote by Aldous Huxley, there are things known and there are things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. So really this process for improving courses and changing courses and course delivery, to me it's really about opening my own doors of perception. Now, underlying the wrist, if you look at the second image up there, that's a plain film radiograph of the same exact wrist. And in layman's terms, it's an x-ray basically. And what you're looking at now is you can make out some good fine detail about the specific bones that are involved in the wrist complex. You can't really see too much of the soft tissue structure, but plain film is not really designed for that. Now, if you go to the very last image, this is now a magnetic resonance image of the same exact wrist. So again, you could still make out the bony structures, the bony landmarks, but now you get a lot more clue or a lot more visualization of the soft tissue structure that is involved. And if you may or may not notice it, but in the picture of just the wrist, you don't see it. In the x-ray image of the wrist, you don't see it. But in the MRI image, the very last bone, the scaphoid bone, actually has a fracture that's going through the middle part of the bone. And so really, diagnostic imaging, and that's the course that I chose to utilize for this process. Diagnostic imaging is really about opening up the doors of perception and seeing those deeper layers that do exist there that may not readily be apparent. And so really this process for me has been about that. It's been about, teaching in a certain way or a certain process, but then knowing there's something else or something deeper, there's something greater involved. But really, how do I open my own doors of perception in order to really be able to see that? So these are some of the general kind of themes or ideas that I'd like to get across to you this morning as, I do take you down in this process. So the reason why I specifically chose this diagnostic imaging course was because in our curriculum, traditionally, it has been taught as an online course. And we were changing our curriculum a little bit to make it more of a hybrid type format where the students would come to campus for in-class sessions, alternating weeks, and then do more of a traditional online format the other weeks that they weren't there. Now, so really my question in this process was, am I really engaging the students the way I need to? And there's nothing wrong with online learning. There's a time and place and a method for it. But I didn't feel like I was adequately doing it. I didn't think that I was implementing the strategies that I needed to ensure that the students were getting what they needed to out of the course and that they were actively engaged in the process rather than just passively learning. And so that's really the kind of the problem or the question that I sort of had in this process. And then, of course, the next step to that, of course, would be, are the students really getting what they need to in terms of outcomes? Are they really be able to apply what they learn to scenarios, which in our case would be their clinical rotations? So again, like I mentioned, PhD 5070 Diagnostic Imaging and PT Practice was the course focus here. And again, we transitioned from the online to the hybrid format. Now, this course in and of itself is a fairly difficult course in our curriculum. It's a third year, a final year course. It's one of the last courses students take before they go out on their final set of clinical rotations before they eventually graduate. But what this course really requires, it requires an integration of everything they've learned in the curriculum up to that point. So there's a lot of focus on anatomy, physiology, pathology, and there's also a big focus on clinical reasoning and differential diagnosis. And then on top of that, you're adding everything there is to know about different types of imaging techniques, the physics that's involved with it, and really having a student kind of relearn a process and try to apply it to content that they should already know and have mastered to a certain degree. So it's a tall task to ask for, and it's a very important course to ensure students are engaged, because if they're not, then they can very easily get off track in that class and not really get the learning outcomes that they need to get. So really, I don't think that I did anything drastic. Really, what I wanted to do was to get the students more involved. And so, as best as possible, make the students active participants in the learning process rather than making it a passive type process. Preach and sleep, what was it that Dr. Blaine said this morning? To get away from that and to really make it something that the students can fully get what they need to out of it. The other idea was to, really make the course flexible. There's a course syllabus, there's something that I plan to teach, something that I wanted to teach, but then really allowing the flow of the semester, allowing the flow of student learning to kind of determine what needed to happen next during that next class session, during that next interaction with the students. And really what this allowed me to do was to really engage students at various levels of understanding and really engage them at their level of understanding, which I thought needed to happen in order for them to progress forward. And the other thing too was, again, to make the students more active learners and to invest in the process. I really utilized the concept of feedback very well. Not just the feedback I gave to the students, but the feedback that I got from them as the semester went along. And the course went along. And so I allowed the students to use feedback that I gave them. And, traditionally I would always give feedback and I would say, okay, this is what you did well, this is what could have used improvement, and really kind of just assume that they were going to get it and assume that they were going to use that in another future assignment or a future course or something like that. But I, I didn't want to, leave it to fate in that sense. I felt that, it was important to see the student apply that feedback directly. And so I gave them an opportunity really to apply that feedback and resubmit assignments for further evaluation to demonstrate to me that they had actually implemented the things or the corrections that needed to be made. And so ultimately, this became a matter of really quality over quantity. When each of us teaches our courses, we have a set of 10 objectives or 15 objectives, whatever it is, that we want to deliver, that we want to address as the course is progressing. And a lot of times our courses become about getting through those objectives rather than taking the time to stop and realize or understand, are the students really getting it? Have they really understood what they needed to? And so throughout the course, what I did was I kind of took a step back and I let, again, the students' feedback or their performance really drive the next session. So, I felt that if I didn't get to step 8, 9, or 10 in any given lecture or content session, that it was okay. If I spent that extra time in steps 2 and 3 to make sure students understood steps 2 and 3 really well, then I felt that they were able to kind of become active participants to get themselves to steps 8, 9, and 10 kind of on the road. And I wasn't having to, walk them through those higher order thinking and processes and outcomes. But really focusing early on, I was able to have them kind of build that for themselves. So specifically speaking in this course, I mentioned the on and off weeks as far as their presence on campus in this hybrid format. And so really the off weeks, we focused on a lot of the actual lecture material because there were, again, like I said, a lot of these topics in this course were brand new and foreign to the students. So we spent those off weeks really focusing on student instruction. And so the way I did this was we did audio supplemented presentations where the presentation would be available through Blackboard at a preset time, the course time, and the students would be able to watch the PowerPoint and listen to a voice recording of me as they were progressing. Now, I really focused on that in the first half of the semester, but again, like I mentioned, I was trying to get student feedback as the semester went along. And I don't know, you guys probably already noticed it now, but I tend to have kind of a monotone, kind of dull type voice. And so what I found was the feedback I got from students was that they would, start to watch the PowerPoint, they would listen to my voice, and I usually put them to sleep. So, which in our program, some students have trouble sleeping, so it was a good kind of. I'm not recommending they watch it at 11 p.m. to get to bed, but that's ended up what happening. So because of that, we changed it in the middle of the course. So we started using Blackboard Collaborate, and I was able to actually deliver at the set course times. I was actually to deliver the lecture while I was interacting with the students. So it became a lot more interactive. I was able to answer questions, field questions as they arose during the instruction. And it gave students a visualization. Now with the cameras on me, they're seeing me speaking, but then I'm also able to put up various X-ray film or various MRI or CT scan images for them to help understand the concepts better, rather than, again, relying on them to do that on their own. Now, this was supplemented with the weeks that they were on campus, and the students focused a lot on discussion. And the discussion became a lot more lively. It became a lot more about not, can you go back and explain this? Can you go back and explain that? It became more about applying what it is that they had learned, what we had covered in the. So what we really did was we focused on cases, and it wasn't case scenarios where I made up cases. What I had them do was, prior to this course, they had spent a out on. I instructed them while they're out on their clinical rotations to gather case studies about physical therapy clients that they had worked with and how diagnostic image played a role in that interaction with that patient or that treatment of that patient. And so the end result was that the students came in, and during those weeks on campus, they were able to have discussions on their cases, and they were able to, it's a lot more practical. If it's somebody that you've worked with, somebody that you see, somebody that you dealt with their images while you were in the clinic with them, then you really can apply the concepts a lot more readily and then increase the level of discussion with classmates as well. And so that's kind of what we did with that case-based type format. I mentioned feedback already. The other aspect of feedback was, again, the feedback the students gave to me throughout the semester. If a class session ended, discussion session ended, that there's always a few students lingering around. So I made it a point to kind of make my way around to virtually every student in the class and get kind of that informal feedback from them as far as how's the class going, what are we meeting the objectives? Are you learning what you need to? Is there any areas of difficulty, anything we need to clarify? And so that really became kind of an ongoing process to really make the next session or the next lecture that much more relevant because it addressed concerns or needs that they had. And then, of course, practice, practice, practice. And so, again, when this class was taught in strictly an online format, I instructed the students to go out and practice, and I was assuming that they were going out and practicing. Whether that was happening or not, I don't know. But what this allowed us to do was, now that we had covered all of this lecture material in the off weeks, when they were on campus, I was able to utilize the X-ray viewer machine we have in our building, as well as some computer software, the MRI viewer. And I was able to have the student analyze images, which is ultimately what they need to do. And I would sit there and I could give them feedback or give them things to look out for or watch out for. So it made, again, the level of interaction that much better. So again, the big part of this too that I mentioned was assessment. And so again, were the students really gaining what they needed to out of this process? Were they really learning? Were they meeting the course objectives? And so some of the direct and indirect measures I used for assessment within the course was throughout the course they had a few quizzes after various units, but then ultimately the examination. And really I used, the way I created this examination, all my examinations, was using a table of specifications to really ensure the validity of the exam questions. And so this is actually not a change I made. I did this with this part with the online format as well, but there were some modifications in the hybrid format. And so I don't know how well you can see it, but in the upper right corner, there's a rough example of a table of specification outline that I used. And so really you're looking at the various content areas on one side, and then you're looking at the levels of understanding or comprehension, and that's based on Bloom's taxonomy. And then you can really allocate the number of questions that will address each content area, whether it's a more of a regurgitation recall type question or a higher order processing type question. All the assignments in the course, the case studies they presented on, the image analysis assignments, everything really was based on rubrics that I created, again, tying back into the course objectives and really kind of giving me more of a concrete comparison of one assignment versus the next assignment that was submitted. Indirect feedback through kind of student evaluations at the end of the course. I mentioned throughout the course the informal feedback, but at the end of the course they did complete their course evaluation. So I looked at that to see how well they felt they were engaged in the course. And then when our students graduate, they take a comprehensive exit exam, which we administer. And so we're able to track the outcomes from that examination. So that's another piece that I looked at. And then they ultimately have to take a licensure examination to practice as a physical therapist, which we don't regulate or administer that examination, but that would be another way of determining not only are they getting what they need to out of this specific course, but out of the entire curriculum. And so I'm still kind of analyzing the data, and there's nothing that really is outstanding here, I would say, but just a few numbers that I thought I would highlight. So I'm comparing again the 2014 cohort, which went through the complete online model, to the 2015, which underwent this hybrid model. And the average class performance, the average class grade was an 81.5%. It improved to 86.5%. With the hybrid cohort. Now, there were a few changes in the course assignments, so that's not probably the best exact comparison to compare the two results there. But nevertheless, it is overall an increase in average performance. The exit exam that I mentioned, I looked specifically at questions that the exit exam's 200 questions, but I looked specifically at questions that dealt with needing to know content in terms of diagnostic imaging and applying it. And in the 2014 group, the students averaged about 69.2% correct, and that slightly improved to 71.7% in that realm as well. The exit surveys, so when the students graduate, we also administer exit surveys to them so that they can comment to us or let us know how well prepared they felt in various content areas. And so in the area of diagnostic imaging, the 2014 group reported 71% reported they were well prepared to eventually take the licensure examination, versus in this group that they just took the exit survey last week, 97% reported that they felt prepared in the area of diagnostic imaging. And then finally, some of the comments on the student course evaluations. In 2014, out of all the students that filled out the course surveys at the end of the course, there was only one comment that was left, and that was, this class should not be online. And so, maybe that was a nice way of saying you're not good at teaching an online course. It may be, I don't know, but whatever it is, it kind of reinforced my selection of this course as well, because, obviously I wasn't getting through to the students. What's that expression? If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So the lack of comments makes me think that the students were generally displeased with the course itself. Versus the 2015 and hybrid course, the comments are generally more positive, a lot more plentiful, have more substance to them. And I'm not going to read them all, but clearly there's some kind of change. So, like I said, I'm still analyzing some of the data I'm getting from this course, and I teach this course every fall. And so there'll be changes I'll be making for this 2016 class as well. But regardless of if there's a statistical change or not, which I haven't determined yet, the students, outcome-wise, the students feel like they're getting something more out of it. And so ultimately, that's, I think, a step in the right direction. So I was pleased to see that the students were responding well to that. So when we talk about some of these ideas that we're talking about today, as far as engaging and so forth, really engaging students in critical thinking, that was the key task I felt in this process, to really get the students involved and become active participants. And so really the course objectives, I went back and I reworked some of the course objectives. I tailored them more to be in line with Bloom's taxonomy. I tailored them more to be in line with the cognitive, affective, psychomotor domains. And so I felt going into the course that I had a better set of objectives, or a better set of kind of targets that I was working towards with the students. And so really that allowed me to, whenever I gave them feedback, whenever I, gave them any kind of input as far as their presentations, anything they did. I was able to tie it directly back to the course objectives, which made, I think, the process a lot more valid for the students. The think, pair, share method, that's something that I use in all my courses, but it's something I really utilized well in this course to get the students to really start to actively think about what it is they were learning and to start that process of, creating thoughts, but then also sharing thoughts with their colleagues in their class. It really also became a matter of asking the right questions. And, oftentimes I think I fell into the trap of, not necessarily asking the right questions to students. But what I realized very quickly was that, I'm the content expert for the most part. The students are not. They're the ones that are learning it. So if anyone's going to ask the right questions, it's going to be me. It has to be me to really facilitate the classroom discussion. And so I really made it a point to try to understand what the students were saying and then ask them the appropriate follow-up questions. And then really relating everything again back to the general theme of the course and also the progression through the program, because again, this is a third-year course at the end of their curriculum, and so really they're building on common themes that I'm just kind of walking them through at the end. And then finally, and I don't know how important this is, but I found this to be very important, was to let the students do the talking. In other words, if you go to buy a car, you want to do as little talking as possible. You want the salesman to do all the talking. So you can see where they're at, where they're coming from, and ultimately you can decide how much you're willing to pay for that car, without giving away too much information. Well, it's almost the same thing. The students, you allow them to do the talking so that they are the ones that are setting up the level of understanding for that classroom, and then your job really is to facilitate them from lower levels of understanding to higher levels of understanding. I just recently bought a car, so that was fresh on my mind. So some of the best practices that were utilized was, again, the course syllabus. What I utilized was a graphic syllabus. And this concept, I've learned about it recently. But basically, how many times do we print out a syllabus that's 7, 8, 9, however many pages long, and it's lots of words, and we expect our students to read it? It's, in the School of Allied Health Sciences, we made a shirt that said it's in the syllabus to express the importance of that to our students. And so, I think we sometimes take it for granted that the students are utilizing the syllabus the way they need to. And so by creating a graphic syllabus, what it allows you to do, and I have an example from this course up there on this slide, and really it allows you to give a better visualization to what the students are learning, what you want them to learn. The box in yellow, it's kind of the general overarching themes or concepts in the course that's going to be throughout each of the units. And then within each unit, it breaks it down into different anatomical regions. And then the course assessments, how are the quizzes linked to various subject content areas? How are the overall summative assessments linked to the overall course? And so it just became a useful tool for me, visualize better as I was planning the course out. But then also the feedback I've gotten from students on this one thing has been phenomenal. I've had students that have reported that, okay, they understand what it is they're trying, or they need to learn from this course, and they need to get out of this course. So that's good feedback. The assignments, again, were linked to rubrics, and they were linked directly with the course objectives. And like I mentioned before, cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains were all addressed within this course. The other practice that I did was I initiated cold calls. So I let the students know early in the semester at the beginning that I would be calling on people, even people that didn't raise their hand, in order to answer or guide a discussion or something of that nature. And the students did not like that at first because it made them kind of nervous. And but what I found was that as the semester went along, students knew it was coming, so they came to expect it. And so because of that, they seemed to be better prepared for that type. Who wants to be the person that gets called on and then doesn't have anything appropriate or intelligent to say? Not me. So because of that, the students, they felt the need to better prepare in anticipation of something like this. I'm not going to say it was a resounding success, from the beginning, any of these practices, but it was kind of an ongoing process. And then the midterm analysis. So I already mentioned the end of the semester course evaluations. I already mentioned ongoing feedback after each class session. The additional thing I did for student feedback was and I do this in all my courses, is at the midterm point, we give midterm evaluations, we're assessing the students. So why can't we as instructors have a midterm assessment of how we're doing in our instruction? And so what I do is I hand out a note card to each of my students, and I basically ask them some basic questions. I ask them on the note card to fill out, what is going well for you? What do you understand well? What has the instructor explained to you well? The next question involves what is unclear, what is confusing still, what has the instructor not done a good job of explaining to you. The next question is, what can Dr. Dalal do the remainder of the semester to help facilitate your learning within this course? And then the final question is, what can you as a student do to help facilitate your own learning throughout the remainder of this course? And I really, a couple of things with that. One, I really want honest to God feedback from the students. And so I let them know that it's not going to impact their grade whatsoever. I tell them they don't have to write their name on the card if they don't want to. I really just want some feedback so that I know how to help them learn better, or maybe explain things a different way, or so forth. The second thing about that is, we all know that certain students are going to look at that as a productive activity and they're going to utilize it such. Other students may not. And so my goal with it, by all means, is to take and implement every single comment that's made on every single card by the student. I think that would defeat the purpose. But it's really to look for trends and themes that are occurring, and really, if I need to modify the way I'm saying it, then to do that. Because, really, I don't know a lot of things, but I know what I know, and I know what the students need to know in any given course I teach. And so because of that, I want to make sure that the class becomes about them and not about me lecturing. And then as far as technology-wise, I mentioned that we kind of transitioned to Blackboard Collaborate based on some of the student feedback, and that worked out really well. And so that is definitely some technology I will continue to use. Again, this generation of students, they are linked to their phones, they're linked to their smart devices. And so really, how do we best utilize that? How do we use that to engage and get through to the students? And so there's a number of apps out there on the iPhone, iPad, Android, dealing with diagnostic imaging and radiology. And so I encourage the students to download more than one of these apps in order to have that instant access, which is what they like. And so that when I'm talking about something in class, I don't mind them looking at their app and analyzing images while I'm talking about concepts in class. I don't mind while they're, sitting there heating up their lunch, instead of looking on Facebook or Twitter, hey, look at your radiology app, I don't think they did that, but that was kind of the idea. So really, utilizing those apps to our benefit, because they're going to use them anyway. And then again, I mentioned the MRI viewer on the computer. Really, the best way to view MRI is not single image at a time, but to actually toggle back and forth between the images. And so we were able to set that up so the students were able to utilize MRI the way it needs to be. So finally, just different kind of approaches to this, and many of us are relatively new to teaching. Many of us are kind of at the midpoint in our careers, and several of you are seasoned experts and have mastered the art of teaching. But what I've really found in this process is it doesn't matter where you are in terms of your level of experience. It's really about making changes. And when it comes to making changes, when we first make changes, I think we're all at the beginner level at first. So really what I tried to lay out in the next couple of slides is how I envision this idea of engaging students more and taking student feedback and utilizing it, and how it would look from a beginner point of view, an intermediate point of view, and more of an advanced point of view. And so really from a beginner point of view, which I feel that I'm still at a beginner point of view, again, you are the content expert. You are the one that knows what needs to be taught. You are the one that knows what needs to happen or needs to be facilitated to the student. And so I think that's the advantage that each of us has immediately right off the bat. And then based on that, there's several steps you can take. So some of the steps I took is that after every course I taught, I always keep a journal, and not just course, but after every class session. And I take notes in the journal after the class is over, just to kind of self-reflect on what went well in the class, what didn't go well, what could I have said differently, what do I think I said particularly well that I need to reinforce or need to try again? And so it really became a chance to do that immediately after every class session. The other thing is a course analysis. In our program, I'm sure many of you do it as well, but in our program, our director, Dr. Brown Cross, she's insistent that at the end of every course, we perform a course analysis to basically engage in this process. And at first I was like, really, with everything else going on, we got to do that too? But I'm really glad she makes it a point of that, because it's really helping, I think, over the long run to be reflective and to make positive changes. And so that's another process that, to initially engage in. Start to solicit student input. Now, you don't have to, go all the way down the road and really have the students, provide lots of feedback at first, but just slowly, work your way slowly through getting that feedback from students, things that you reflect on in your journal, get students' opinions on that too, so you get their perspective, and so forth. And then finally, it's really, I think, about making small changes. I don't think you can change the entire course overnight. I don't think you can change the way you teach overnight. It really is about small changes, and it's really about seeing the effects of those changes in terms of analyzing student performance. So in other words, we're all aware of the research process. You don't want to change 10 variables at once, otherwise you don't know what made a difference, if at all. So from that point of view, you want to be kind of slow and gradual with your change. And then ultimately, it's about being flexible and open to feedback. You're going to get a lot of information that may be of use to you, that may not be of use to you, but I think it's really about being flexible about what the data is saying and really utilizing it such. Now, from an intermediate point of view, I think each iteration of a course you teach can be completely different than every other time you teach it. It really depends on the students, because the students within each cohort change a lot from one cohort to another. And so, it's really about developing that balance between what needs to be taught and how it's going to be taught. And certain cohorts may require a little bit more instruction early on. Others may be ready to go and actively learn from the beginning. So I think it's really being adaptable to those various presentations. And of course, engaging in conferences such as this, or seminars or courses that will help supplement your teaching as well. And again, being flexible and open to feedback. That's, I think, absolutely vital, no matter how well you get at the go along of this process. And then finally, advanced. I'm not going to say too much about this, because I think Dr. Blaine covered this very well in his talk earlier. And that's the model, I would say. That's the advanced model, what they were able to do at his university. And that is, I think, the end result is you want to, or a work in progress maybe, that you want to build towards something like that. And I think, again, the key part of it is to be open and flexible and open to feedback in that process. Okay, so I don't know how much time I have left, but I just a quick brief activity just to get ourselves thinking about this. What I'd like you to do is to do a think, pair, share, at your table. And what I would like each of you to do is think about a lower level and an upper level course that you may teach within your program or your degree program. and really concentrate on some of the challenges that you have faced in either course in terms of student engagement and really getting students to be active participants in the learning process. And then based on that, what solutions have you come up with? What ideas have you come up with? And so let's just take a couple of minutes to do that. And once you do that, then go ahead and partner up with the person sitting next to you and go ahead and exchange some ideas with them. And then ultimately, maybe with everybody at your table, share there. So, yes, no, maybe? Okay, so it looks like I am running to the end of my time. So, we'll have to engage in that conversation at a later point. So, at this time, if there's any questions for me, I'll be happy to address any questions. Yes, sir.
Again, Dr. Angela, again, thank you for the presentation. I did learn a lot. Good question. As I asked Dr. Lane, I think the critical piece is getting our students to think critically and be able to problem solve and be able to walk through those 6 steps involved in critical thinking and problem solving process. So in this class, where do you get for think critically and be able to problem use those analytical skills to be able to introduce as well as deduce solutions to possible problems. The second you mentioned that they take the exit exam versus the licensure exam. My question is, and coordinated in terms of improvements on the exit exam versus improvement on the licensure exam?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So, as far as the critical thinking process within the course itself, I have to say I have an advantage because, again, this course is at the end of the curriculum. And so, throughout the curriculum, we've been reinforcing this critical thinking process, and it's been highlighted and focused on and drawn out within the students from the very beginning of the program. And then the other advantage that I have with this course is it's sandwiched in between 2 semesters where they are out on clinical rotations. And so because of that, they have an opportunity to apply their learning in a practical scenario a lot better, so that when they are coming back to campus for this course, I'm really able to draw them back to clinical scenarios based on my own experience in the clinic as well, and kind of knowing what that end result needs to be, helping to kind of facilitate them along that process. And then as far as the exit exam, now we get the overall results of the licensure exam from the board. However, we don't get the analysis of item breakdown for that exam. We do for our own exit exam because we administer it. So because of that, it's a little bit harder to tell how they specifically did in a specific content area on the actual licensure exam. But really what we've gone back and done is correlate the results of our exit exam and then looking at each cohort when they eventually do sit for their board exam, how many of them were able to pass, and were those the students that on the first attempt or whatever it is, and how many of those students passed the exit exam or achieved certain scores on the exit exam. So we are able to make that correlation. Yes, the trend is positive. Yes, thank you. Yes. Sure. The question was, how do I get students to be open to this new approach in learning? Well, I really put the ball in the student's lap, so to speak. In other words, I let them know, and I'm very kind of open with them from the get-go that, hey, listen, this, you need to learn this content, you need to know this, but not just for the purpose of passing this exam, not for the purpose of just performing well on a test that I administer, but really because you're going to use this throughout your career. It's something that you're going to use each and every day. And so I think, again, the advantage is since they've been out on a few clinicals, they've already seen the reality of that they are going to need, to learn in certain ways. And so, I really tell them that it's not really about me, it's really about you. I know the content, I've learned it, I need to know what I need to know. So ultimately, it's up to you to learn and to get, the ball rolling, so to speak, as far as learning what it is they need to learn. And so really it's getting the student to buy in, I think, early in the semester, early in the process. And what's happened is that now that I do it the students know I do it in one class, and so they know I'm going to do it in every class. And so now they kind of walk into the class at the beginning of the semester knowing or anticipating that they're going to have to work for it. I'm just not going to give it to them. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
And again, if you want to have the experience that Dr. DeLaw had last summer, you can sign up too for the Faculty Learning Community for 2016. All of our pupils from that summer were star pupils. Dr. DeLaw was the one who just, happened to volunteer. So I just want to thank him again for his presentation. Let's give him another round of applause. Okay, we are going to segue into giving away some more of these prizes, and the illustrious Dr. Tim Moore from the Office of Research has arrived. So hold on to your seats because he's going to probably take us on a wild ride. And Ms. Williams is going to give away some more prizes.
All right, thank you all for following instructions and tweeting and posting on Facebook. Our Twitter winner is at Psychology Tani, who tweeted, "Teaching equals learning. If everyone is failing, no one is learning. Thus, who exactly is teaching?" Okay, and then on Facebook, only one person posted on Facebook. Oh, okay, only one person I found posted on Facebook. I'm sorry. Through the hashtag FAMUTLC16 is Aurelia Alexander, who posted, "It is okay to fail, better to fail early and work to get it back on the rails. As faculty, we are here to inspire our students." Dr. Robert Blaine, hashtag FAMUTLC16. Please come up and select the prize of your choice. Thank you so much. Continue to tweet and post on Facebook. If you don't know how to do that, please ask a colleague. Collaborate with someone at your table who does, or you can ask me. We will do it again, so continue to do that, please.
Well, good afternoon. Luke Brown. Yes, ma'am.
You want to grab that mic?
No, I'm shy. Couple of things. I want to thank that for what you're doing. We don't want to say thank you enough because it's not you, kids don't come, not you, kids don't graduate. Gals, back on the street. I thank you for what you do each and every day. Get me on that thing, I'll mess up. I'll also say this. When I decided to do the right proposals, you folks are doing a bang-up job. You have set all-time records today for your proposals. We got 2 more months to go. We're 154 million. Great I also want to say this, our reports are trending upward, and I also want to think there's lots more money in the federal sector. For those of you who don't know, the federal government is static, and it's hard to back to but what we've got now is 50% of all federal dollars are by on our serving institutions, women-owned small business. So the chase that our bodies is think big. When I got here about 18 months ago, we had some challenges within some programs and division of research. First thing we need to do is kind of reset our mission here, which was to make sure that we are supporting you. We in the division of research work for you. I'm going to say that again. We work with you. Your job is to innovate, engage, fight. Our job is been submitted, reviewed, awarded to you for execution. Your job is not to be the accountant, HR executive, or the procurement officer. Your job is to be the scientist. And we have too long allowed. We're here to help this easier for you because in the end, if you don't have fun doing it, it ain't going to be done. All right. Other part about this, I encourage each of you to think real hard about this other step, which is innovation. Intellectual property is the driving force behind this university, and it's a way the inventor can make 40 cents of every dollar that comes in off of your invention. It could be a new app. It could be a new piece of hardware. It could be a new method how we make a piece of material faster, better, cheaper. I encourage you to think about your ideas and report them. So you young man by the name of Reese Alter, he's our tech expert director, great guy. He works for you. I'll say it again, he works for you. You call him e-commerce. It's not for you to take your day to come find him to a building. It's his job to come find you. Why is this important? We are beginning to get a big push from the state of Florida. They've got $1 billion on putting into research, infrastructure, new hires, and the like. They've asked 2 things from us. Watch proposals and awards go up. Show us where we're making economic impact with our ideas. So you have a stake in this. When I worked in industry, I got $1 idea that I patented. $1. A handshake on the back from the president. Here, you can make 40 cents on the dollar. And I'll take this. You cut licensing deal, as soon as the dollar hits the bank account and the foundation, I'm gonna cut you a check. I wouldn't want it any other way. I'm gonna treat you the other way. All right? Last part. Part of the success of our students going forward is going to be research. They need to have undergrad research experience. In fact, it's a requirement. Looking at medical, law school, PT, those, sorry, at 4.0 is undergraduate research. It can be social sciences, it can be education, it can be physics, it can be biology. You can run a post-gel electrophoresis. It doesn't matter. They need the opportunity. You, as tutors, can help them think. And it will be what separates everybody else. As a guy that started in medical school at all, I can tell you, there are 700 kids. You admitted 25 out of a class of 162 little kids. The part that set these children apart was research. All the I took, Mama got this, that, or I did research, Dr. So you have that power. You have that passion. That's why. I'll tell you this. You folks in this room are going to be hired. Give you the last fact. There are 12 schools in the SUS. We are number 6 in terms of research. You folks are at the flying weight box level and you're punching at the heavyweight level. I applaud you. I applaud you for what you're about. I encourage you. Don't get frustrated. We're working this process through to make it easier for you to write, to create, to do. Last comment, we're working on a innovation plan for faculty. Lots of rumors floating around. What is it? How do I make my money? If you're on the E&G line, you buy out 30% of a project, you effectively draw down those up. At the end of the year, the plan is to give you 20% of your salary savings back at something. You're making $100,000 a year, you got your time on a project that equates to $10,000 at the end of the academic year. Ain't bad. I'm going to say this gives us much money. Why are we doing this? Because it's a way to say thank you. It's a way to pay those that do. It's a way to encourage those that don't. Because faculty, we have a mission, as Rand Grant said. Education, research. We will communicate and change the world through ideas. You are the folks that are going to be that change agent. And I applaud you for what you've done and what you're doing. We've got some remarkable young men and women that attend this university. I can tell you this, you can see whether there's a fact member in their life. They've got a swag, they've got a cadence, they've got a style about them. They know they got somebody. And I would encourage you to think about this. Each of us have to go change somebody else's life for the positive. As I've said before, giant pinball machine. Kid is involved, he goes to the play. Get a dead pin, he goes to the recycle. Get an active pin, and the energy level goes up, and that ball does remarkable things. You folks are the key to this. All the things at the top, all the lessons in the talent Democrat doesn't. You show you've had one of the most important things, which is curiosity. How do we look at the world and how are we going to change it? It's all in this room. I thank you. I appreciate Dr. Boston letting me come in here and waste your time. Right? This conversation with y'all. So I want to make sure I got it right. Are there any questions before I sit down? Yes, sir.
What's the name of that gentleman in your office?
Reese Allsbury. R-I-S period. S-B-E-R. If he doesn't come, call me. I'll get him in the taxes.
Allsbury, A-L-S-B-E-R.
B-E-R. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If you can't find it, 412-5102 is the main office. We'll be more than happy to guide that.
$130,000 a year. Florida State's $135,000 a year. Auburn University's $175,000 a year. You are taking folks that are in need, helping build their passion, their confidence, and their ability to take what God gave them and do something great with it. You don't think that's an awe-inspiring, heavy burden to wear as a mantle of leaders that you are? You would say. You're shaping the world. And we can either sit there and throw rock, or we can take these young minds and shape them for life. You need me to talk to your kids? I'll come. You want me to help you write proposals? I will. You want me to review what you're doing? I'll do it. I'll give you the 12 points that I learned how to do it. I moved $200 million worth of research in my career. It ain't hard. If it was, I couldn't do it. You're a part. Any other questions? Listen, thank y'all for your time. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you, number one. Appreciate it.
Okay, I was looking for Deidre to do another prize. I think she stepped out. But at this point, I think we are pretty much on schedule, if not ahead of schedule, which is always good. And so we will now prepare ourselves to have lunch, which I do believe is completely set up. I do want to take a moment to thank Dr. Moore again for coming over and sharing with us about research and research opportunities. He's very serious about making himself and his office staff available to assist you with all types of research opportunities. So, if at this point there are no questions, we are going to go ahead and prepare for lunch. As soon as the provost arrives, we will allow her to come and provide greetings. And shortly thereafter, we will also recognize the members of the FAMU Leadership Academy. Many of them are here with us today, and so we wanted to recognize them and that new leadership initiative that has been launched by President Mangum. So those are the two things on the lineup now. I also want to take a moment to recognize our Apple rep, who has joined us today. Ms. Rachel Ross is with us. If she can just stand up and wave her hand. Thank you so much for joining us for the conference. And so now, if you are hungry enough, there is lunch in the far right corner, and we will prepare to await the arrival of the provost. Thank you.
All right. All right. So just up and down or side to side. All right. Perfect. All right. I'm not after that.